Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nathan Cudgel here, and today I want to talk about Borat. Now, this isn't a specific review of Borat 1 or 2, it's more just a sort of retrospective on the series as a whole. I mean, you could take it as a review of both, because I will sort of review both, but this is more just me talking about Borat because I want to talk about Borat. Now, who or what is Borat? Well, the original film came out in 2006, over 10 years ago now, and it was a massive social phenomenon. For years, you couldn't go anywhere without hearing someone say, "Very nice, my wave, wah wah way woo." And I'm sorry, I can't do a good Borat impression, but for years, it was everywhere. And now recently they've come out with Borat 2 on Amazon Prime, which I'll talk more about Borat 2 a little later on, but for now I want to focus a little bit more on the original Borat. Now, what makes the first Borat film so special is that it's not completely unique in its presentation. If you don't know, the whole concept of Borat is that Sacha Baron Cohen, this British comedian, dresses up as this weird guy from Kazakhstan, which I say weird guy from Kazakhstan. I'm not saying everyone from Kazakhstan is weird, but if you've seen the film, you'll know what I mean when I say he's a weird guy from Kazakhstan, especially considering the movie's presentation of Kazakhstan is this. But regardless, he dresses up as this weird foreigner, and it's a sort of fish out of water scenario, and this Kazakhstani journalist, and he interviews people in America. Shenanigans and hijinks ensue. I don't know why I said it, shenanigans.
What do you do?
I'm the pastor of a church.
Yes. What do you do?
I have spent years in construction. I'm recently retired.
You are retired?
Yes.
Which, I mean, it is a pretty simple concept, and it's not the most original. Especially nowadays, there's tons of social experiments and pranks, even, you might call them, especially on YouTube. I mean, that was a large part of Filthy Frank's success, was doing sort of things like this in public and getting people's reactions to it. There's 1,000,001 pranks like that on YouTube. And even movies and TV shows now, like Impractical Jokers, and even back then, things like Jackass were very much like this. But where this differentiates from most things that try to do something like this is that, one, it manages to tell an actual story throughout it, and as well, it actually has a lot of commentary to say. And that commentary aspect is what does elevate Borat for me to be my favorite comedy of all time. And I am serious about that. I find the film absolutely hilarious, but what really pushes it over the edge for me, over things like Jackass and Filthy Frank and such, is that it is really trying to say something, and there is some commentary in there. And of course, that's not to say things like Filthy Frank aren't trying to comment on satire and pushing the limits and such, but Borat, well, was kind of the first to do it, but also is still so relevant today. Seeing this weird foreigner interact with these Americans and seeing their weird reactions to him is just hysterical, and it does kind of expose how maybe we're the weird ones. I mean, sure, it's undeniable, Borat is an absolute weirdo, but through these interactions in the first Borat movie, you can see how maybe Americans aren't as normal as we like to view ourselves. Because the truth is, most people have never been put in a scenario like Borat puts people into. Most people have never been put in any scenario like this, and in their head they think, oh yeah, I would respond normally. But in real life, it's just a very weird scenario most people don't know how to react in. And one of my favorite things the film really hammers in and comments on is the weird politeness people in the West love to have. This can especially be seen in my favorite part of the movie, the plantation house scene. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, which I will say, You should go watch Borat 1, at least. I would probably say watch both. I'll talk a little more about that. But regardless, in the plantation house scene, Borat comes and eats a fancy dinner with all these southern people meeting in this old plantation house on a street actually called Secession Avenue. And of course, Borat acts completely unaware of any sort of the connotations of that and just completely screws up the dinner.
Is your wife?
Nope, that's my wife.
In my country, they would go crazy.
Oh my.
For these two, not so much.
Yes.
Wow, well.
He insults the guests, he does things to get on their nerves. All the while, the guests are trying to act so incredibly polite, including to the point where Borat comes downstairs with a bag of his own shit and asks where to throw it away, and no one even gets mad.
I think that the cultural differences are vast.
Exactly.
And I think he's a delightful man, and it wouldn't take very much time for him to really become Americanized.
Thank you very much. I feel much better. Cindy, where shall I put this?
Just,
Where shall I put this?
Maybe in the other restroom down.
And that's not the only point in the film stuff like that happens, but it all sort of points out this weird fake politeness Americans and overall people of the West love to have. How someone will absolutely despise you and hate you, and yet still smile and wave at you here. As well, I gotta applaud Sacha Baron Cohen's just amazingness at being able to get the most weird reactions out of people and really getting people to say things that normally they probably wouldn't say on a camera. Of course, the thing everyone thinks about when I say that is the rodeo scene, where Borat is interviewing this owner of the rodeo, and, well, he basically gets the rodeo guy to admit that he wants to kill all gays.
Take care.
Thank you.
I ain't gonna kiss you.
Oh, why not?
The people that do the kissing over here are the ones that float around like that.
Are they all alone?
Yeah, stay away from them that kiss.
Okay.
You don't want nobody kissing.
In my country, they take them and they take them to jail and finish
Take them out and hang them.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to get done here.
High five.
Thank you.
How Sacha Baron Cohen is so good at getting people to have those kind of reactions, I don't know. Maybe it's just some strange talent he has. Maybe he's just lucky to get these things on camera. But all I know is these reactions are not only hilarious, but there is a little more commentary in there. Whereas something like in Practical Jokers, yeah, it's funny to see the guy's reaction to weird things these people are saying to them and such, but there's not more beyond that. It's pretty lighthearted. And I'm not dissing on Impractical Jokers or anything like that. Not everything needs to have a deep, strong message and theme behind it. I'm not your high school English teacher, okay? Not everything needs to have a message or theme. But what makes Borat so unique is that they did manage to still have that. And the way they're able to do that is through actually telling a real 3-act structured story. I feel like most things like this would just focus on the jokes and that's that, but this does actually, if you map it out, follow the plot diagram your high school English teacher taught you about. Which is all the more impressive considering I don't think there is really much of a script for this. Pretty much every scene is improvised in some way or another, except for maybe a couple of scenes. Which, if you don't know what the story of Borat is, which I am acting under the assumption most of you have seen or at least know what or who Borat is, but if you don't know, it's just Borat and his producer travel to America and interview Americans for make cultural benefit for great glorious nation Kazakhstan. It's literally in the title. That is the title. Borat, Cultural Learnings of America for make benefit glorious nation Kazakhstan. And then once Borat's in America, he sees CJ on Baywatch, gets absolutely enamored, and travels to California to try to marry her. And then on that road trip to California, they continue to make this documentary. Pretty simple. But what's so impressive is that in the middle of all these interviews and weird things happening, they are actually able to get you a little attached to these characters. You feel attached to Borat. When Borat's sad at the sort of downbeat at the start of the third act, you feel it. I always feel bad for him at that part where he meets the frat boys and stuff, because while Borat is an incredibly racist, misogynistic, homophobic, pretty much everything you don't want to be, Sacha Baron Cohen does such a great job acting as Borat, you do feel some sympathy for him in a sort of Michael Scott way. A sort of, yeah, you're awful, but, I mean, you don't really mean it. And as well, what goes along with them doing that 3-act story structure in the midst of all these, I don't want to call them pranks, because they're a bit more than that, but what makes it so special is that somehow they managed to keep the pacing throughout. Throughout all of Borat, it never really slows down or stops. In fact, it has better pacing than most movies, normally made, scripted, acted movies. And that still just amazes me, and I don't know how much credit I can really give to the cast and crew for making that happen. I have to give a lot of credit to the editor. It's edited very well for that great pacing. But at the same time, I do feel like some of that is just luck. Lightning in a bottle. They were able to improvise this entire movie in a sort of YouTube way. And that's sort of the main point I want to make about this. How much Borat inspired and affected not just my YouTube videos, but a lot of what you see on YouTube. Notice earlier how I specifically mentioned Filthy Frank and all the hood prank videos, because those videos are, whether directly or indirectly, inspired by Borat. This sort of guerrilla-style filmmaking is extremely reminiscent of YouTube videos not only I have made, but a lot of YouTubers have made. This reactionary and improvised movie format is something Borat really did sort of pioneer. Because while we can't know the exact way they filmed Borat or anything, because Sacha Baron Cohen has been extremely secretive with all that sort of stuff, I do hope one day he releases some sort of book or a documentary on the making of the Borat films, because I do really want to see that. But the way it comes off from what we do know and from what you see in the movie, it mostly seems like Sacha Baron Cohen and a couple of cast and crew members just took a road trip across America and made some funnies. Which again makes it all the more impressive that they were able to have a great pacing, a great 3-act structure, even if the story's a bit simplistic, characters you care about in that story, and most of all, an actual point to it all, because Borat really does have a point to it. It points out how backwards America really is when you think about it. Things like our insane fake politeness towards each other. How most people won't say what they think. And how most people's opinions really are pretty awful when said out loud. And Borat's able to expose all this through taking you with him in this sort of fish out of water adventure. Because whereas most fish out of water stories, it's a weird guy coming over and you're seeing things from the Western perspective. You're seeing everyone laugh at him because he's the fish out of water and he's the one and he doesn't understand the cultural aspects here and such. But with Borat, it's the opposite. You're looking at Americans from Borat's perspective most of the time. Which might sound weird at first. I mean, Borat's the main character. He's the funny, my wife guy, you know, wee-woo, funny foreign guy. But next time you watch Borat, think about who you're actually paying attention to. When Borat does something weird or funny, like carries a bag of his own shit downstairs, who are you paying more attention to? Borat? Or the real-life people's reactions to Borat? Because in almost every scene, I find myself paying far more attention to the real-life people's reactions. Not only because that's half the joke, but also because it is shot in a way where you feel like they're the fish out of water. You're introduced to Borat and you're taken along this journey with Borat. This is a documentary of Borat. He's filming this, he's talking to you, the audience, and all things considered, you feel like he's kind of the normal one here, and all these weirdo Americans are just that, weirdo Americans. And seeing that sort of unique perspective is something I feel like most people wouldn't really expect from a film like this. And I will say it is a shame that so many people, the whole point of it all kind of flew over their heads. Because while Borat is a great comedy, I do feel like the main aspect of it is that social commentary on everything. Especially with Borat 2 now, seeing how offended people are getting at the politics and how Borat 2 is too political now. Borat 1 is extremely political. There's literally a scene where he goes into a rodeo and tells everyone that he hopes George Bush drinks the blood of every man, woman, and child of Iraq. And they cheer and clap. Because Borat isn't just, haha, funny fish out of water foreign man, makes jokes about his waif, and says wobble wee woo, and says weird funny things, and ha ha, ha ha, isn't that funny? Because that's not the point of it. I mean, sure, that is partially the point, to laugh at that, but at the same time, it was very purposeful in having a point behind it all, and it's that point, that social commentary, that elevates Borat from being just some random little comedy film to being the major phenomenon it was back in 2006 and the years that followed. And unfortunately, along with becoming so popular as that, I feel it kind of got a little misconstrued as to why Borat was good. People stopped really talking about that commentary and started more focusing on, again, haha, funny foreign man says very nice. So ironically enough, the thing that made Borat popular in the first place was then kind of forgotten once it got popular. And that's what makes Borat superior to all these parody movies and stuff that came afterwards in the 2000s. You know what I'm talking about. Scary movie, superhero movie. They made 12.5 movies like that, as well as just other comedies of the 2000s. What makes Borat superior to all of that is that there is a big point to it. And as well, there is a story to it. It's not just funny joke after funny joke after funny joke. There is character and there is a heart to the film. And so, while I understand why it may not be for everyone, the first Borat film is my favorite comedy of all time. And it has had a massive impact on my own content and most people on YouTube's content, I'd say. I mean, I was making content inspired by Borat long before I'd even seen Borat. I didn't even realize it was indirectly inspired by Borat. And only now, looking back, do I realize, I mean, that's kind of the source of all this internet humor. Because Borat really was a sort of pioneer of what many people would call now internet and young person humor. Is it offensive? Is it loud? Yeah. But at the same time, there is always a point to it. It sort of reminds me of South Park, another great comedy and one of my favorite shows of all time, probably, in that, is it loud and offensive and not come off as the smartest thing in the world? Of course. But if you really do pay attention, there is a point to it all. South Park is one of the most smartly written shows that's ever been made. And sure, if you just look at it on the surface level, it's just a loud, annoying cartoon about little kids cussing. But if you do watch and actually pay attention, every episode has a message or some sort of satire or commentary that is being made. Whether it be Tom Cruise locked in the closet, or Scientology, or what have you, there's always some point being made there, or some greater issue being talked about. And Borat is just the same way. On the surface, it's not that smart. It's funny, sure, but it's loud and it's offensive, and it's not for everyone. But why I would say Borat, everyone should at least watch it once, is that, while you may not find every joke in it super funny, the commentary in it is for everyone. Not necessarily because you'll feel super comfortable watching it, but because it gives such a unique perspective on these real life people, because every single person in Borat is real. That rodeo guy is real. Those people at the plantation house, that's real. I mean, aside from Borat, his producer, and a couple of other people, everyone in those interviews is real. Those are their real reactions, and that's honestly how a lot of Americans would probably react to Borat. Now, I've just talked a lot about the first Borat movie, probably in a very rambly fashion. I apologize for that. It's just kind of how I make videos. Just like Borat, there's no script here. But regardless, I think it's time to talk about Borat 2. Now, this film has faced some controversy. It came out about a week or two ago now, and it's Borat in 2020. It's Sacha Baron Cohen playing Borat again after 14 or so years, coming back over to America and making funnies. Of course, there's more to it than just the funnies, but there's more controversy this time than with the first Borat. Because this time I feel like a lot of people, maybe now that they're older, or maybe a bit smarter, or more mature, or maybe a mixture of all, or maybe the film is just a little different now, people are finally noticing this film is pretty political. Now, I don't want to talk too much on the politics of it, though I do find the politics of it funny. No matter which side of the aisle you find yourself on, seeing Borat yell at Michael Penis telling him he's fired while wearing a Donald Trump suit, it's pretty funny. And while it is maybe a little more outright political, Borat has always been extremely political, which is why I fail to understand these people who are ranting and raving about how this is liberal propaganda and how Borat was never political. Go back and watch the first Borat movie. It's extremely political. But regardless, Borat 2, it's not as good as the first Borat. Not because of the politics, it just didn't all come together as perfectly as the first Borat. The first Borat, I feel like, very much was lightning in the bottle. They managed to have a 3-act structure story, memorable characters you actually kind of care about, a heart to it all, a message, and hilarious improvised comedy. That's hard to all combine into one, and they somehow managed to do it. Borat 2 does a lot of those things, but it just doesn't come together as well. For one, I don't find the jokes as funny. Not because they're more political, I actually quite like that about it, I found that really funny. Though, I will say, it does kind of bum me out that I feel like Borat 2, in 14 years, won't be as funny as Borat 1 was. Because a lot of the jokes in Borat 1 still apply today. I mean, sure, George Bush may not be the president anymore, but things like racism, sexism, homophobia, those are all still issues, and most of the jokes in the movie are still things that apply today. Whereas Borat 2 is a bit more topical with a lot of its jokes, and so I feel like in 10 years, Borat 2 may not be as good. In 10 months, Borat 2 may not be as good. I encourage you, if you're going to watch Borat 2, watch it as soon as possible, because something tells me every day Borat 2 is going to get a little less funny. Not because the jokes are worse or anything, it's just that they're more topical. And that's not to say in 10 years or 20 years, I don't think Borat 2 will still be funny. I still think it'll be very funny. I just think it will be aged. I could also see Borat 2 perhaps aging well in a sort of time capsule way. Maybe I could see me in 10 years going back and enjoying it even more as a sort of time capsule sort of way. Like, wow, things really did used to be like that, huh? But as for right now, it does worry me a little how topical a lot of it is. And that's not a super big negative. I'm not going to take away a ton from it. It's not even my main problem with the movie. It's just something worth noting. If given the choice between a topical current event joke or a pretty timeless joke, of course I'm going to take the timeless joke. But as well, I just don't laugh as much at Borat 2. It's just as simple as that. Well, I find a lot of the jokes really funny. I also find a lot of them a bit more forced. I mean, I think the funniest scene of the movie is the abortion scene. That sounds really messed up saying it out loud. Now, since the film's a bit more current than Borat 1, I won't give too many specifics, but while I found that scene absolutely hilarious, it was undeniably a lot more forced than the first Borat movie. Which goes along with the fact that the story, while more complex and character-filled, which I like, is a bit more forced. Because whereas the first Borat movie has a very simple story, road trip across America, shenanigans and hijinks ensue, Borat 2, on the other hand, is a bit more complex. I won't tell all the specifics, but it involves Borat and his daughter's relationship, coming to America, a change in the plot, delivering a monkey, quarantine, coronavirus, it changes a lot, which is not a bad thing. I actually liked that aspect a lot, that the plot kept changing. I was kept on my feet guessing what's going to happen next pretty much the whole way through. But at the same time, it doesn't come together as smoothly. Because it is a more complex plot, it's a lot harder to nail the landing on an improvised, made on-the-go movie. And for all they had to do, I think the film is a little more impressive than the first Borat movie even, in how well they were able to bring it all together, because it is more complex characters, more complex plot, even more complex and hard to do jokes and situations. And it is impressive how good that came together, because if you were to lay out all that happens in Borat 2 to me on paper, I would say this wouldn't work. I would say it would be an incoherent mess, and you couldn't do it. But they did it pretty well, and it is impressive. But it doesn't stop the fact that it doesn't nail the landing as well as Borat 1 does. The pacing is not as good. The editing is not as good, though I understand that. It was a lot probably harder to edit this one, since a lot of the footage you're dealing with, having filmed sort of improvised social situation stuff like this that you can't really redo, having to edit that all together is incredibly hard, especially when you add in the complexity that's been added to this film. I will say I do think there were things that could have been improved, particularly in the middle of the film. Really, the film feels like the first act, really good. The third act, really good. The middle, it dips. And it's not that it was an awful dip or anything. I still found myself laughing consistently through it. Spoiler, I still really liked Borat 2. It just didn't have that silky smooth consistency the first Borat film did. It was more of an up and down roller coaster. Not everything landed or was as good as the first Borat movie consistency wise. But at the same time, Borat 2 is extremely impressive. And at the same time, Borat 2 is really funny. And while I don't like it as much as the first film, I still find it to be probably the best comedy of this year at least. I mean, that's not saying much. I mean, how many films have even released this year? But regardless, I really liked Borat 2, and if you liked the first Borat film, I think you'll like Borat 2 as well. Both of these films, especially with Borat 2, it really surprises me in that they were able to capture the heart and the message of it again. Particularly the heart. There's more heart in this film than the first film, and I was especially surprised that there is as much heart as there was in the first film. And this film has even more of that, and it's able to do it better than the first film even. I might have said that a bit weird right there, but the heart in this film, the character interactions are much better than the first film, and I loved that aspect of the first film. And well, things like the pacing and the consistency of the plot, and even a bit of the consistency of the jokes, I still found the majority of the jokes landed. But even though those may have taken a little bit of a hit, I can see how it was kind of worth it. And well, Borat 2 overall doesn't beat out Borat 1 for me. I still really liked it. It may not be my favorite comedy of all time like the first Borat film was, but I'm very happy it came out, and I did really enjoy it. And it did prove to me that Borat still works. If you had asked me a couple months ago, I would say you couldn't make a Borat 2 now. It's lightning in a bottle, it won't be as funny, go watch Bruno. But I was proved wrong. It was great. Was it as great? No. But that's like comparing a diamond to gold. Sure, I prefer the diamond, but the gold's good too. And I would highly recommend, in fact, I implore everyone watching this, go watch both Borat movies. They're pretty short, they're both only like an hour and a half long, they're easy to get a hold of, and while not everyone may find the style of humor in it the funniest, though if you like my videos, you'll probably like Borat, but even if you don't find that style of humor the funniest, the commentary in it is for everyone. Because even if some of it can be a little uncomfortable to watch, it is important to watch. Because I don't think there's ever been another American or maybe even English film that really portrays this subject matter from this perspective in such a way. It's an inverse fish out of water story, and while I'm sure there have been films like that, I highly doubt there's ever been one that did it the way Borat did. They're two of the most unique films you'll ever watch, and I absolutely love Borat. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, go watch Borat. Bye.
Thank you for watching my film. I hope you like. Dziękuję.